You got to know knowledge are we. I give that just for being you must be your absolute predator. We do not even have any enemies. Maybe they're not saying about watching us and thinking that someday we will be dead.
Every anime season brings with it a host of new shows, nowadays numbering as many as several dozen at a time. While a select few of these may be original works, the vast majority are adaptations, typically of manga or light novels. Now, on the surface, there's nothing inherently wrong with this setup. However, more often than not, these anime adapt material that is not yet finished. This almost always results in an ending that either A, does not wrap up the storyline, or B, diverges from the source material and creates an anime original conclusion of varying quality. However, not every adaptation falls into this trap. Today we have Parasyte, or Kiseiju if that strikes your fancy, a two-core series that began airing in fall of 2014, based on the late 80s, early 90s manga of the same name. This means that the story is complete, with the thankful expectation that the anime will tell a full tale. Why Parasyte has taken so long to receive this adaptation is beyond me, for it is certainly an unforgettable experience. Izumi Shinichi is a young man going about his average slice of life, when his body is invaded by a microparasitic organism that enters his right arm and attempts to take over his brain. If successful, the parasite would use his body as a killing machine to slaughter and feast upon other human beings. But it fails. Due to the nature of this failure, the organism now permanently inhabits Shinichi's right hand. As a result, Shinichi and the parasite, named Migi, are forced to agree on a kind of coexistence. Migi cannot survive without the constant flow of nutrients from the rest of Shinichi's body, while Shinichi cannot survive without Migi's aid, as he is now a target for the many other parasites integrating themselves into human society. One of the defining aspects of Parasyte is the back-and-forth relationship between Shinichi and Migi. Migi and all their parasites are unable to feel emotion, and thus are completely motivated by self-preservation. From the outset, it is clear that Migi has little to no regard for any life other than his own, and he only allies with Shinichi out of pure necessity. This is in contrast with Shinichi himself, who, even by human standards, is a kind and altruistic young man. The concept of helping others without reason baffles Migi, while Shinichi is infuriated by the parasite's cold, heartless attitude. It's endlessly captivating to watch the pair's dialogue evolve as the series progresses, each learning from and occasionally chastising the other. Going hand in hand with the pair's ongoing debate is an internal conflict within Shinichi alone. As the series proceeds, his symbiotic relationship with Migi begins to affect him in both body and mind, and Shinichi starts to question his basic humanity. He feels less affected by the terrifying events happening around him, and is able to keep calm in situations that would normally horrify his fellow humans. This sometimes culminates in Shinichi going out of his way to prove to himself that he is still a human being with the ability to feel, and isn't turning into some kind of emotionless freak. In some ways, this aspect of the show is almost tragic, as we personally witness the ways that Shinichi evolves, as well as the ways he tries to convince himself he is not. In the beginning, individual parasites are solitary creatures. Most concern themselves with blending into a normal lifestyle only just long enough to get to their next meal. However, as their presence becomes more known to the hapless humans, the parasites begin to worry for their safety. They make efforts to collaborate amongst each other and coexist with the humans, granted in the same way that we humans coexist with livestock. The growth of these hostile parasites generally takes a backseat to the development of Shinichi and Migi, but it is an ever-present and ever-interesting element of the show. It is consistently intriguing to note the small ways that the parasites and their group dynamic changes, especially considering that it affects the kinds of foes Shinichi faces. Another refreshing bit in Parasyte is a fairly simple one. Everyone acts like an actual living person. In the vast majority of cases, people act and respond realistically to the events around them. One thing I've always hated in stories like this is that the average individual, and sometimes even the government, seems completely unaware of the larger conflict. Like, there are people going around with little to no regard for witnesses and butchering people. You'd think the general populace, and especially the government, would have at least an inkling of what was happening, and thankfully, they do. Although the show definitely focuses on Shinichi and Migi, especially early on, there's not an overbearing sense that they're the only ones that know the truth. They might be the only ones capable of actually fighting, but at least other people do have something of a handle on what's happening. Parasyte's music is composed by a Japanese DJ named Ken Arai. Although he's been active since 2003 and released multiple albums, this is his first time ever doing an anime soundtrack. And after this performance, I'd be surprised if he doesn't get more work. Arai's various pieces in Parasyte tend to fall into one of two camps, either piano or electronic, and both are, by and large, executed extraordinarily well. Songs are very versatile, setting either a mellow or upbeat pace as needed, though of course the piano tends to lend itself to the calmer tracks and vice versa. The only flaw in an otherwise exceptional soundtrack is the occasional reliance on dubstep, but it's not used often enough to overshadow the rest of the composition. On a similar note, I quite enjoyed the credits theme, It's the Right Time, by Daichi Miura. It's a calm, primarily vocal piece that gives you a moment to wind down after what is usually a heart-pounding episode, and the visuals call back to the peace of normal life in a nice contrast to the escalating events of the series. Parasyte's animation was handled by Madhouse. Chances are, if you're even remotely familiar with anime, you've seen something by these guys. Their portfolio is rather large, with the likes of Death Note, Black Lagoon, Redline, Hunter x Hunter, and the relatively recent hit, No Game, No Life. In short, this means that you should expect Parasyte to look good, and it fully delivers. The fight scenes, despite usually devolving to a mass of swirling tentacles, are almost always effective at conveying a sense of danger and urgency, and they're visually compelling if nothing else. The parasites themselves are appropriately disturbing, especially as they unfurl their heads, and there wasn't any real censorship to speak of, at least not that I noticed. Apart from the parasites, the visual style on the whole doesn't really push the envelope, but if anything that only serves to parallel the normal human lifestyle with the parasites' violent insanity. Let Me Hear by Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. This song, this opening, it starts promising, it really does, but it just unravels as it goes along. The beat gives way to I don't even know what, and for a decent portion of the latter half, it just sounds like an auto-tuned screech. From sheer repetition, I've grown to tolerate this theme and derive some enjoyment from its better bits, but I'm not so sure I like it. Listen, no offense to anyone who did enjoy it, more power to you, but it's not my musical tastes whatsoever. Oh, and if you do happen to like Let Me Hear, do yourself a favor and don't listen to the full version, just trust me. Ironically, my second complaint is another of the musical variety. When I like Parasyte's music, I like it a lot. When I don't, I really don't. I've already given it a brief mention, but I mean, dubstep, really? Some of the tunes just don't mesh well with their respective scenes, in my opinion, or not as well as they could have. Thankfully, these tracks don't make up a massive portion of the soundtrack, but they stick out like a sore thumb when they do. Finally, there are the rare moments that feel a little forced. It's difficult to accurately explain without getting into spoilers, but I'll give a fairly tame example. Let's say there are a group of policemen, with shotguns, facing one individual that they have very strong reason to believe is a parasite. Then, this individual says, "Follow me." There is no good reason why they would actually follow him instead of trying to blow him away right then and there. But for the sake of set variety, I guess, they do follow him. Here's another. Say a school, in real life, is the victim of a brutally gruesome attack that claims the lives of, I don't know, over a dozen kids and faculty. And then, sometime later, it gets attacked again. Somehow I doubt classes would be quick to reopen, which Parasyte conveniently ignores. Do you see what I mean? To be fair, most of these logic jumps don't really have an impact on the plot one way or the other, but they really shouldn't exist in the first place. I'll tell you up front, this is going to be a short section. There really wasn't a single aspect of Parasyte that I absolutely could not abide. The best I can come up with is that on very rare occasions, extras throughout a scene are rendered in 3D rather than 2D, and their clash with the environment caught my eye more than the actual focus of the scene. This tactic is becoming more and more common in anime, and it's not one I'm particularly thrilled by. Parasyte is, in a word, stellar. Any issues I've voiced throughout this review are comparatively minor to its overwhelming strengths. The Shinichi-Migi duo is extremely compelling, the parasites themselves are intriguingly brutal and well done, plus the overall plotline is actually pretty satisfying. This was certainly one of my favorite anime of the past seasons, and not for lack of competition. So, after taking everything into account, as well as my own subjective enjoyment on a scale from F to S, I unreservedly give Parasyte an S rating. Watch it, and watch it now. Parasyte is currently available for legal streaming from Crunchyroll, so there's really no excuse to ignore it. You know, unless you're one of those guys that thinks the manga is always better, and probably nothing I say would convince you otherwise. And that'll do it. Thanks for watching, have a great day, leave any feedback in the comments, and see you next time.
僕を待っているよ